It's FA Cup final weekend, and this is the fixture I look forward to the most in the football calendar. Yes, it may not be the biggest game financially, that's the playoff final. You won't become the champions of England. This isn't considered the most elite competition. That's the Champions League. I don't care. I'm a romantic, but FA Cup final is the biggest game of the season for me, and I can't wait. We've got Crystal Palace looking to win their first major trophy ever, coming up against Manchester City, who could go their first season without a trophy in 8 years, which was also the only season Pep Guardiola failed to win a trophy. It's all to play for at Wembley. It's the FA Cup final. I can't wait. Let's preview it. Let's start by discussing Crystal Palace because it's the easier team to predict. I'm very confident 10 of these will be starting at Wembley. In goal will, of course, be Dean Henderson, who I think has had a fantastic season at Selhurst Park. They'll be playing their back three. I think Chris Richards has gone under the radar a little bit. I think he's really stepped up since Chelsea recalled Chalobah out of spite. But I think Richards has had a good second half of the season and will produce a threat to Manchester City. Lacroix will be at the heart of the defence, a fantastic signing by them, and then the skipper Mark Gay playing left-sided centre-back there. That will be the back three for Glasnow's side. All three provide a threat from set pieces. We'll get onto that in just a second. Munoz, who's been one of the better players down the right-hand side in Premier League this season, very consistent, capable of producing assists, and will cause City's left-back a few issues. But I do wonder if Pep Guardiola is perhaps going to deploy a left winger in this game to pin Munoz back a bit and stretch the pitch, something he perhaps failed to do against Southampton. Over on the left side, we know Mitchell will certainly start this game as well. Now, he missed last week, but Wharton, Glasnow described him as 90% chance of being able to play at Wembley, so he'll come back into the centre midfield, and it's vital that he does. I think if I was a Palace fan, I'd have been a bit nervous over his injury status, but he appears to be okay. The big question is who plays next to him. But what we do know is in the number 10 roles, we'll have Eze and Sarr, and Mateta will be the lone striker. And this is where Glasgow's got a big call to make, because he's got three contenders, and it's three different profiles of central midfielder as well. We've got Lerma in there, who I don't think he's been totally fancied by Glasgow, played centre-back plenty times when one of those three are missing as well. And then we've got Kamada, who I thought when Crystal Palace beat Aston Villa in the semi-final at Wembley, I thought that was possibly one of the best team performances I've seen this season. Palace were fantastic. Glasgow got his tactics spot on. There was a lot of big performers in that game. And Eze grabbed the headlines, Sarr grabbed the headlines. But actually, I think it was possibly Mitchell's and Kamada's best performances that I've seen them play in a Palace shirt. It's just that the attacking players were on form and they get all the limelight. So I think Kamada has an argument that on form and on merit, he deserves to start. Now, when he first arrived at Crystal Palace, I expected him to do well in this role, where Sarr is really, given how he played at Frankfurt under Glasner. It hasn't really happened for him in the Premier League in that position. And Glasner kept playing him central midfield, and I thought he really struggled. But actually, I think in recent weeks, he's really stepped up. He's grown into that role. And like I said, against Villa, he was superb in midfield. But I do just wonder, because it's Manchester City, if Glasner perhaps will put Will Hughes in midfield alongside Wharton instead. It wouldn't surprise me if it was Kamada. It probably wouldn't even surprise me if it was Lerma. I feel confident the other 10 will be right. But in my little prediction here, I'm going to go for Will Hughes. Now, we all know how Crystal Palace will play. The threat that they contain on the counter-attack is ridiculous with Eze and Sarr, and Villa couldn't cope with it really. The pace that they've got going forward, and it's not just those two, it's Munoz come down that right side. Mitchell's not slow either down that left. And they've got one of the best passers in midfield in Wharton in the league, in my opinion. I absolutely love him. I think the ability he's got to pick the ball up from those three and to spray those passes, his technical ability is superb. The way he picks up on the half turn, he's always looking forward. He's not scared to release the ball early either. And when you're an attacking midfielder like Sarr or Eze, who enjoys getting on the ball and enjoys running at defences, you need someone like Wharton behind you to be giving you that ball. Because sometimes I think central midfielders can be a bit guilty of slowing the game down. That's not something Wharton can do and will do it, but I think when there's an opportunity to attack, I think that is his priority. Get the ball in to those players in particular. Doesn't mind the long ball direct to Mateta either. And with Mateta, they've got someone who is completely transformed under Glasgow. He's gone from, I was going to say, an average Premier League striker. I think that would be a compliment. He was a poor Premier League striker. Since Glasnow's come in, he's turned him into one of the most reliable strikers in the Premier League. You feel like he's always capable of scoring no matter who they're playing. Palace have a lot of threats. Counter-attack's one of them. Set pieces is another. Only Nottingham Forest have scored more goals from set pieces this season in the Premier League than Crystal Palace. But what's impressive here is, whilst they've scored the same amount of goals from corners as Arsenal say, Arsenal have a lot more corners. Arsenal average 6 corners a game. Crystal Palace is less than 4.5 a game. And I appreciate 1.5 per game doesn't sound much, but when you multiply that by 38, it's not too shabby in Palace's favour. And we've seen this at the Etihad. Chris Richards getting the goal. And this is another reason Wharton will be key. He takes the set pieces from this corner of the pitch, his in-swinging crosses. And I think Richards is the main threat, followed by Lacroix. I don't think Gay possesses the same offensive threat as the other two. Now watch him go score this weekend. But I think Manchester City need to worry about Richards and Lacroix the most. But saying that, City defending set pieces, they're not the worst. Despite perhaps not being the tallest team in the league, they're not too shabby at it. Admittedly, they concede less set pieces, therefore less opportunities to score. But even if you were to break it down per set piece or per goal or anything like that, City's still come out quite strong in the league. Not as strong as Brentford, they're the best at it, but they're not too shabby. But I still think this will be one of Palace's biggest threats on Saturday evening. Getting set pieces and getting Richards and Lacroix in particular on the end of those crosses from Wharton or perhaps from Eze from indirect free kicks. Palace fare, I think they're 5th in the league for indirect free kicks, shots from indirect free kicks. They're better at those than they are corners for some reason. I guess it's maybe just the type of cross that comes into the box. Harder to mark maybe because everybody's running in on goal, whereas from a corner, your defenders are plotted along the 6-yard line, zonal marking, so they're attacking away from their goal. They're attacking that ball in from the cross, whereas a deep free kick, they're running towards their own goal, harder to defend. That's my opinion anyway. So I'm confident that that's how Crystal Palace will line up. Man City, though, it's a bit more difficult. As mentioned, you've got to go back to 2016-17 when Manchester City last went a season without picking up a trophy, and this is their last opportunity. That was the only season Pep Guardiola has failed to win a trophy in his managerial career. But City have got a bit of an issue here, and that is they play Bournemouth on Tuesday night. Now, Crystal Palace also play on Tuesday against Wolves, but they can discard that game. They don't have to focus on that one at all. They can write it off, pretend it doesn't even exist. It's all in at Wembley for Palace. But Pep Guardiola has spoken about the importance of that fixture against Bournemouth, about how qualifying for the Champions League is perhaps more important to Manchester City than winning the FA Cup. So they've got an important game on Tuesday. That may have an impact on his team selection. But this City side, I think, is hard to call in terms of what he's going to do. It's Pep Guardiola. He doesn't mind a surprise or two. Now, even the goalkeeper is difficult to predict because Ortega has been their FA Cup goalkeeper for the last couple of rounds. Not the start of the FA Cup this season because Ederson came back from injury, so he used the FA Cup almost to build up his fitness. And Pep usually sticks with Ortega, but he had that error last year, a couple of years ago. He had the error in the FA Cup final anyway. I think he might stick with him. I think he might stick with Ortega. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if Ederson starts this one. The back four, I think Diaz will continue in his role. And I think Gavardio will come back into centre-back. He played left-back against Southampton, but before that, he was sitting here alongside Diaz. And Manchester City are unbeaten in their last 10 games. Man City are coming into this game in good form. 7 wins, 3 draws. They're looking good. I think it's easy to think that perhaps they're not in great form because A, they drew Southampton last week, and B, when you look at the league table, it's still a poor season for Manchester City. But they're doing all right this last month. It looked like the City of old in a few games, especially, funny enough, against Aston Villa. Man City beat Aston Villa, and then Crystal Palace beat them at the weekend at Wembley. So I think it'll be Diaz and Guardiola centre-back. Now, Akanji is back, and I was tempted to put him in at right-back in my little prediction, but I'm going to go back with Nunez. He didn't feature last weekend as Pep made some changes. Rico Lewis played. And I think he might just go for Nunez. I think he trusts Nunez at right back. And then at left back, I think O'Reilly will come back into the team as well. And I think he should. I think he deserves to start. I think O'Reilly's been brilliant since coming into the first team. I think Guardiola's been their player of the season by a mile, in my opinion. But I think O'Reilly will come back in at left back. And he'll have his hands full with Munoz down that side. Going into the midfield, Kevin De Bruyne is going to start, surely. His last ever final for Manchester City. And I think, as much as I'm a romantic, I think you have to be a pure football romantic that De Bruyne will score the winning goal at Wembley or something like that. For me, I'm maybe not that pure. I'll be honest with you, I'm hoping Crystal Palace win the FA Cup on Saturday. I would just like to see them win it for them, for their fans. They've never won a major trophy. This is what football's about for me, the underdog in the final. That I think it's human nature to go to the underdog, assuming they're not your team's rivals, and I appreciate they're a London team, but I've never really seen them as rivals to West Ham. I think De Bruyne will start in midfield for Pep, though, with Kovacic. I think he trusts Kovacic a lot. Nico Gonzalez has found himself out the team a little bit, so I'd be surprised if he started. So I think that's what he will do in the middle of the park. Bernardo Silva is always a pick for Pep, and understandably so. Doesn't really let him down. A big game player. Kind of have a bit of a dirty streak about him as well, but I do think Bernardo Silva is one of those few players I think I've seen be world-class in more than one position. I think you can get some players that are world-class, like take Mo Salah, world-class right-winger, but if you were to move him out elsewhere in the pitch, I'm not sure you see a world-class player. With Bernardo Silva at City, I've seen him be world-class in multiple positions. Incredible. And then Haaland, I think he'll start him. I think that maybe this is why he pushed him through the 90 minutes against Southampton, just to get his fitness up. He didn't get a sniff. I think, I read a statistic, I think Man City had 26 shots against Southampton. Haaland had the 26th shot. He didn't have the previous 25, it wasn't him. He barely got a sniff against Southampton. And I think he might struggle a little bit. If Crystal Palace don't play the high line, which I don't think they will, I think Haaland may struggle up against Lacroix, even if he peels off him and goes to Richards or Gay. They've got three good centre-backs, Crystal Palace. It could be a tough evening for Haaland, but it's up to his teammates to A, find him anyway, and B, use the space that he gives them. The rest of the team gets a bit trickier to call at this point. Marmoush, Doku, there's a lot of options. Phil Foden, although he's been out of form, he's still an option. I think he'll bring in Gundogan for this game. He didn't play at all last weekend, so was he dropped? Was he rested? I think there's maybe an element of both, but I think he'll come back into the fold for this one. And I think he's going to get a left winger out there. You've got Savinho, Doku, Marmoush. Who do we think he's going to go for? Truth be told, I always say flip a coin, but you need a three-sided one, don't you? Roll a dice, right? I'm going to put Marmoush in. No, I'm going to go Doku. I don't like changing my mind. I'm going to put Doku in there. I think he may just get the nod just to provide that width, just to stretch that pitch a little bit. Because when I've seen the extended highlights of City against Southampton, I feel like it was very congested in the middle of the park. I think that was an error on City's part. So I think Doku will go out there to try and pin Munoz back a little bit, give him something to worry about, because he is a huge threat down that right-hand side going forward, because he stretches the pitch. Crystal Palace don't mind using him. All you have to do is look at that game against Spurs last week, and I appreciate it's against Spurs, but Munoz was ripping them apart. Eze, Sarr and Mateta really benefit from having him providing the width down the right-hand side. So if you can get Doku out there, it gives him a little bit of a problem. I'd imagine Palace will just push Chris Richards over and push Munoz forward, but I think that's maybe what Pep will go with. So I think that is perhaps the starting 11 for Man City, although I don't say it with the confidence I did when talking about Crystal Palace. I think we're in for one hell of a game at Wembley on Saturday. I think it's hard to call. I'm really looking forward to the game. And this fixture usually throws up goals. The last 4 games, both teams have scored at least 2 goals in every single game. Yes, the last 4 games, Palace and City have scored at least 2 in each of them. So there's goals, goals, goals. Now, I don't know if we'll see that because it's the FA Cup final, but I think we will see what we've seen from Crystal Palace when they faced Aston Villa in the semis. I think we'll see them sitting in. They'll try and play that counter-attacking football, and they'll be really good at it and really effective. Now, at the Etihad, just a month ago, we've seen Crystal Palace take a 2-0 lead against Manchester City. They went on to win 5-2, and I think they really turned into prime City against Palace in that game. But for the first 20, 30 minutes, it wasn't like that. Palace had the lead, and their high press worked. It forced Manchester City to make errors, and they benefited from it, taking a 2-0 lead. And I think that game is why I actually gave Crystal Palace the edge in this match, because they lost 5-2. Now, Glasner said a few things which has stood out for me after that match. He spoke about the messaging he sent, not just to the fans, but to the Crystal Palace players, because at half-time, he took Mateta off and put Will Hughes on. He took off the striker, put a central midfielder on. And after the match, he very much spoke about how he regretted that because it sent the wrong message, in that it perhaps didn't reflect his philosophy or ideology as a footballing manager, and he regretted it. So if Crystal Palace take the lead at Wembley, I don't think we will see him make that error again, which is go too defensive too quickly. He may do it with 5-10 minutes to go, but I don't think we're going to see a sub at half-time, which is whipping Mateta off and putting on a central midfielder to try and really plug that hole and stop them getting overrun in the middle. I think he'll keep his threat on the pitch. And that is exactly what helped against Aston Villa. They kept the threat on the pitch as long as they could, and they benefited from it. 2-0 up, the game was in the balance. Villa were attacking, Villa were threatening, but Crystal Palace got that definitive and killer third goal. It just sucked all enthusiasm and energy out of Aston Villa, because Glasner left the threat on the pitch on the counter-attack, and he made like-for-like substitutions as well. The other thing Glasner spoke about is he'd almost sent like a warning shot to Pep Guardiola, which is, if you play the way you've done, I'm going to figure out how to beat it. And it's really calling Pep's bluff, and I don't think Guardiola will pay attention to it. I think he'll dismiss that, and he should. You know, we're talking about the best manager in the league here. He shouldn't buck his ideas because of what Glasner has said. But what I find interesting about that is it's the confidence on Glasner. It's almost this, he's almost declaring, I'm going to figure out how to play against Manchester City. And he's capable. I think he's a top manager. I think he's underrated. I don't think he gets enough credit. You look at the league table and think, oh, they're 12th. But they had a really difficult start to the season. They had a lot of uncertainty over players like Gay, for example, whether he was staying or going. The season kicked off, and there was still a chance he was going to leave. They've had injuries to key players like Eze, like Wharton. It was a difficult start to life, but they've been really good recently, since the turn of the year especially. Crystal Palace have been a side that's difficult to play against, a side that contains a threat, unbeaten in their last 5 games, winning 2 of them. But not only that, you have to look at the teams they played in those 5 games. Aston Villa, Bournemouth, Spurs, Arsenal. And one more. Nottingham Forest, there you go. I wrote them down. Yes, okay, you can take Spurs out of that last weekend. They cruised to it. But the other 4, that's 4 difficult teams to play against. Both teams are in form going into this one. My concern for Crystal Palace is not just the quality that Man City possess, because ultimately, let's strip it back to basics and simplify this. If Guardiola gets his tactics right and his players turn up, Man City should win this game. They're favourites for a reason. The quality they have on that pitch is second to none. It's ridiculous the amount of talent they've got. But my biggest concern for Crystal Palace is actually the game going the distance, because I think there's a chance that this game may go beyond the full-time whistle, and that's when I would worry for Crystal Palace. Because if Pep Guardiola does have one eye on Tuesday night, and even if he takes 2 players out his ideal starting 11 just because of Tuesday, well, they'll be on the bench. And regardless of what his starting 11 looks like, the players that won't be in the starting 11 will be sat on the bench. That's going to be one hell of a bench Pep Guardiola has. Now, those players may not be in form. That bench may have, for example, Marmoush, Phil Foden, Savinho. Then defensively, they might have Ake, they might have Rico Lewis, Akanji. It's still top players you can have. My concern would be if it went into extra time, Crystal Palace's squad depth just isn't as anywhere near as good as Manchester City's. Bringing on Nketiah for Mateta doesn't really have the same impact as Marmoush coming on for Haaland. Famous last words, Crystal Palace are going to win, Nketiah is going to come off the bench and grab the winner in extra time. But I'm not going to shy away from these opinions and these predictions. That's what this channel is about. I don't mind being wrong. Sometimes I enjoy being wrong. So if I was to predict a Man City win, I hope I am wrong. But for this game, that's my biggest worry. I think if Palace are going to win the FA Cup, I think they've got to do it in 90 minutes. It goes beyond that, and I think City will edge it. But what an occasion. I can't imagine, well, I do. 19 years ago now, I do know what. I mean, I was at school. It was a long, that's how long ago it was. I was at school. I wasn't allowed to go to the FA Cup final because I was at school and we had exams. But it's been a while since we've seen West Ham in an FA Cup final. The nerves is just incredible. We had our Conference League final a couple of years ago, of course, but I don't think that's the same. I think I'd be a hell of a lot more nervous for an FA Cup final than I was for the Conference League final. Plus, I was always confident of winning that match as well against Fiorentina. Not sure Palace fans will have that same... They'll have hope, they'll have belief, they'll have faith. Of course they will, and so they should. And they will make a hell of a noise in that stadium. I remember Villa fans commenting after the game saying that the Palace fans put them to shame, that Villa, it was quite quiet, or perhaps wasn't much, colours or whatever, whereas Crystal Palace was just a sea of blue and red and tifo and noise and stuff like that. And I think we'll see the same again on Saturday. I think Palace are going to do it. I think my score prediction, I'm going to go Crystal Palace 2, Manchester City 1. That's what I think. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you're a Man City fan or a Crystal Palace fan, get involved. And if you're just like myself, you're a neutral, get involved as well. But before you do disappear, please can you do me a quick favour? Drop a like on the video by clicking thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you thought of the video. Slightly different one for me. It's the first time I've done a specific match preview. And it's the first time I've pulled up my Poundland tactical board as well and had a little natter with you all. So let me know what you thought. Your feedback will be shaping how I go about this channel next season. People have left suggestions already. I like them. I'm going to be pinching them and I'm going to be using it to hopefully improve the content for August onwards. So if you enjoyed this, let me know. If you thought it was crap, let me know. But, polite. Don't upset me. And if you think there's ways I can improve it, guess what? Let me know. Catch you in a bit.